Welcome, chosen ones of God. If you found this video, it's not by accident. You've been drawn here for a reason bigger than yourself. You're not just watching a video, you're stepping into a divine moment, designed for your healing, for your awakening. You've been set apart in this noisy world to hear something that speaks directly to your soul. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why. There's a spiritual insight waiting for you in every word, every truth, every breath. I believe you were chosen to hear this message, so don't click away. Let's go deep together. Let's begin where most of us are quietly hurting, right at the heart. Pain doesn't need to be loud to be real. Maybe your heart is carrying the weight of a breakup you didn't see coming. Maybe you're living with the ache of being alone, when you thought by now you'd be loved, secure, maybe even married. Life hasn't turned out the way you imagined. Divorce, disappointment, or just a quiet emptiness has settled in your soul. And the worst part, you blame yourself. But hear me, you were never meant to carry that burden alone. This is where God meets you not in your perfection, but in your brokenness. I've seen how the enemy whispers lies into our hurt, telling us we're not enough, not worthy, not lovable. But those are not the words of your Creator. God's voice calls you to healing, to purpose, to peace. And I want to ask you something. Have you allowed yourself to fully feel, or have you just been surviving? What if your pain isn't a punishment, but an invitation? An invitation to draw closer, to dig deeper, to trust again. Stay with me and we'll walk that road together. Now, if any part of that resonated with you, if something deep inside you said that's me, then I invite you to stay with me all the way through this message. We're going to peel back the layers and explore how your thoughts, your pain, and your questions are all part of a bigger story, a spiritual story. This isn't just motivation, it's revelation. And if you're new here, welcome. Go ahead and tap that like button. It helps this message reach someone else who needs it just as much. And if you haven't already, subscribe and join a growing family of believers and seekers who are chasing deeper meaning. Drop a 777 in the comments to say, I'm ready, because 777 is the number of divine completion, and your breakthrough might just begin right now. Let's not delay any longer. We're about to begin your journey, and it starts right here, right now. Pain doesn't just hurt, it opens doors. And not every visitor at the door of your soul comes bearing healing. In moments when your strength fades and your emotions unravel, you're not just tired, you're exposed. That's when the enemy takes notice. Not the kind of enemy who shouts or storms in, but the one who studies you silently, the one who's patient enough to wait until the cracks show. When your spirit is low, he doesn't need to force his way in. He walks right through your unguarded thoughts. And what he plants there isn't always obvious. It comes as subtle suggestions, as questions that sound like your own voice. Why did this happen? Where is God? Maybe he never cared. That's how spiritual warfare begins. Not with fire, but with whispers. And those whispers, if not examined, become the foundation of despair. There's something you need to know about the mind. It's the first battlefield, and it's also the easiest one to lose if you're unaware. When your heart breaks, your clarity often breaks with it. That's why the enemy doesn't attack your circumstances first. He attacks your perspective. If he can corrupt the way you interpret your pain, he doesn't need to change your situation. He just needs to convince you that it's hopeless. This is where faith becomes more than belief. It becomes a weapon. Faith challenges the lie by offering a lens of truth. I've come to see that faith doesn't deny the pain, it simply refuses to give pain the final word. In seasons of vulnerability, you may notice familiar patterns reemerge, old habits, unhealthy relationships, toxic thinking. These aren't coincidences. They are strategies. Darkness doesn't always create new temptations. It revives the ones you thought you had buried, and it brings people back into your orbit who once held power over peace. Not because the past is chasing you, but because the present moment is testing your growth. When you feel spiritually under attack, it's rarely random. It's often precise. The enemy doesn't waste arrows. He aims them at your open wounds. And yet, this very attack is proof that you are in motion. Stagnant souls aren't pursued because they pose no threat. But the moment you begin seeking more peace, more purpose, more of God, you also become more noticeable to the opposition. That's why the pressure increases. That's why the doubts suddenly intensify. Because your awakening is dangerous to the darkness. I say this not to make you afraid, but to help you see what's actually happening beneath the surface. The resistance you feel isn't always a sign that something's wrong. Sometimes it's the evidence that you're finally on the right road. I've learned that spiritual maturity means recognizing these patterns not as punishment, but as preparation. It's not about avoiding attack. It's about discerning it, knowing that not every voice deserves a reply, not every thought deserves a home, and not every person from your past deserves a second entrance into your future. The more you align with divine truth, the more you'll feel the friction. But that's because you're no longer moving with the current of chaos, you're swimming against it. And that takes strength awareness, and above all the willingness to guard your mind with the same devotion you guard your heart. So when it feels like you're being pulled backward mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it may not be because you're failing. It may be because you're finally being noticed in the spirit realm. Heaven has marked you and hell has taken notice. But don't let the presence of resistance convince you to retreat. Let it confirm your progress. Because if the attack is real, so is your calling. And if your calling is real, then so is your victory. Pain invites a question deeper than logic can answer. Where is God when the heart breaks? That question isn't just human, it's ancient, and it echoes through the Psalms like a whispered cry in the dark. In Psalm 34:18, it is written that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. I do not repeat that verse lightly. I repeat it because I've lived it. I've seen the stillness of God not as distance but as depth. When everything else falls away and your soul is stripped to silence, that is where divine closeness begins, not in the noise of answers, but in the nearness of presence. There's a common mistake people make when they're hurting. They believe healing must come after understanding. They want to know why before they trust how. But faith doesn't work in that sequence. Healing through faith isn't built on clarity, it's built on surrender. Psalm 147:3 tells us God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. But wounds must be exposed before they can be wrapped up. The deepest healing requires an unguarded offering. You cannot be healed from what you refuse to hand over. God does not ask you to pretend that the pieces of your heart aren't scattered. He asks you to bring Him every one of them. What we often do instead is manage our pain. We compartmentalize it. We try to fix it ourselves, thinking time alone will do what only grace can. But the soul doesn't operate on clockwork. Time may mask a wound, but it won't mend it. I've found that when I try to carry my hurt alone, I don't become stronger, I become numb. And numbness isn't healing. It's just silence beneath the surface. The kind of healing God offers isn't passive. It's deeply participatory. You are not a bystander in your own redemption. You are a co-laborer with heaven. But first, you must make the exchange your fragments for His fullness. This is where faith becomes both mystery and miracle. It asks you to offer something raw and vulnerable with no immediate guarantee of relief. But the act of offering itself creates the space for divine intervention. God does not require perfection to draw near. In fact, He comes closer to imperfection than anything else. The brokenhearted are not disqualified for it. Because brokenness, when surrendered, becomes the doorway to spiritual intimacy. God binds up wounds, yes, but more than that, He builds something new from the ruins. So how do you do it? How do you actually give your brokenness to God? It begins with honesty, not with poetic prayers or polished expressions, but with real words, real emotions. You say, God, I don't know what to do with this pain. I don't even know if I trust you with it, but I am tired of carrying it alone. You hand it over again and again. Every time the memory returns, every time the anger rises, every time the disappointment resurfaces, you give it again. Not because you failed the first time, but because surrender is not a one-time event. It is a rhythm of the Spirit. And as you do this, something begins to shift. Slowly, you stop identifying yourself by what broke you. Your pain no longer becomes your lens for identity. Instead, you begin to see yourself as someone who is being healed. Someone who is in the process of transformation. That's the quiet miracle of faith. It doesn't always change your situation overnight, but it changes the posture of your heart in the middle of it. And that change is enough to keep moving. That change is how God rebuilds. It's important to understand that healing is not the absence of memory. You may never forget what you lost, who hurt you, or how it shattered you. But healing means those memories no longer hold power over your peace. They become part of your story without being the center of it. And that is freedom. That is the evidence of divine work. Because you're no longer haunted, you're held. I've come to believe that God doesn't just heal you for your own sake. He heals you so you can carry healing into the lives of others. There is someone who will find hope in your journey because you chose to surrender instead of hide. Your story, even in its most painful chapters, carries the potential to restore faith in someone else. But you must go first. You must choose to stop patching the wound and start placing it in the hands of the healer. If you're waiting for a sign that it's time, this is it. The longer you wait to trust God with your pain, the longer your soul stays paused. He doesn't promise a pain-free life, but He does promise His nearness, His presence, and His healing touch for every soul crushed by sorrow. You are not too far gone. Your heart is not too damaged. There is no such thing as too broken in the language of heaven. There is only this: bring it all. And He will bind, restore, redeem, and raise what you thought could never breathe again. This is not a theory to me. This is truth I have walked through. Faith is not for the moments when life makes sense. Faith is for when nothing makes sense, but you still decide to believe. Healing through faith isn't a moment. It's a journey, a quiet, sacred movement back to wholeness, one act of surrender at a time. So start here, with whatever you're holding. Give it, speak it, lay it down. Because the heart that yields is the heart that heals. And the God who sees you is already reaching for your hand. Pain has a way of convincing you that broken is where your story ends. But I've come to see that while the world is relentless in its breaking of hearts, of hopes, of dreams, God is relentless in rebuilding. What the world shatters, He reshapes. What is lost in the fire, He recasts with glory. There is no ruin too final for Him. He does not discard what's been damaged. He restores it with purpose. And that truth, though quiet, is the beginning of real hope. You may be in a season where it feels like life is pushing you to the edge, pressing against every ounce of strength you have left. You've tried to hold on, but the weight keeps growing. In those moments, hope doesn't come easily. It feels distant, almost impossible to believe in. But what I've discovered is this hope is not about what you feel. It's about what you choose to anchor your soul to. If you anchor it to comfort, it will drift. If you anchor it to outcomes, it will sway. But if you anchor it to the character of God, it will hold. Because God is not merely a healer or helper. He is the very source of goodness itself. This doesn't mean the storm stops when you start hoping. It means the storm no longer defines who you are. When I say God builds from brokenness, I'm not speaking metaphorically. I'm speaking from experience. The very things I thought disqualified me became the places where grace worked most powerfully. Faith doesn't erase the scars. It gives them new meaning. It transforms the wound into a well, a place where others can draw strength from your survival. And that's how God works. He doesn't just rebuild what was. He builds something stronger, deeper, and more enduring than what you had before. I understand why people quit in their pain. The silence feels long. The answers feel absent. But quitting never shortens the storm. It just hands your future over to your fears. The courage to hope is not a denial of pain. It is a declaration that pain will not have the final word. When you stand in the ruins and say, "I still believe," you shake the foundations of everything that came to destroy you. You remind the darkness that your story is still in the hands of the author who never stops writing. Hope is not soft. It is not passive. Hope is a discipline. It is the soul's defiant choice to believe that God is not finished. And I've seen what happens when someone dares to hold on. Light returns. Strength rises. And what once seemed impossible becomes testimony. You don't need to see the full picture to trust the artist. You just need to stay long enough to let the brushstrokes come together. Life may have bruised you, it may have bent you, but it has not buried you. You are still here, and because you are, your healing is still in motion. So, if today feels heavy, if it feels like nothing good could come from where you are, hold on. Not to your understanding, but to His promise. Not to your timeline, but to His nature. God is still building, hope is still breathing, and your story, yes yours, is not over yet. There is a danger in making final judgments halfway through a journey. Pain has a way of distorting perspective, causing you to believe that where you are now is where you'll always be. But I've learned not to measure purpose by proximity. Just because the destination isn't visible doesn't mean you're not moving toward it. The path of faith is rarely straight, and it's never predictable. But God is still guiding you. And to receive what's ahead, you must stop interpreting your life based solely on what's behind. You cannot discover what God is building if your eyes are fixed on what already fell apart. The past holds memories, but it should not hold you. Too many people stay stuck because they've tethered their identity to moments that no longer define them. You are not what happened to you. You are not who left what failed or where you broke. Those may be parts of your story, but they are not your conclusion. I've seen how people cling to what's familiar, even when it hurts, because letting go feels like surrendering control. But holding on to what no longer serves you delays the very healing you're praying for. God's renewal begins where your release starts. Faith always demands movement, not just the movement of your feet, but the movement of your heart. You can't step into the new while dragging the weight of what was. God isn't trying to rebuild the same life you lost. He's preparing something new, something deeper, more refined, shaped by the lessons you've lived through. But to embrace the next chapter, you have to close the one that keeps replaying in your mind. That doesn't mean you forget it happened. It means you no longer allow it to define who you're becoming. Forgiveness, healing, and purpose all flow through the same decision, to release what you cannot rewrite. There's a sacred courage in surrender, not the kind of surrender that says you've given up, but the kind that says you've given it over. Every disappointment, every unanswered question, every memory that haunts you when you hand it to God, you clear the space for Him to plant something new. I've found that God never asks us to release something unless He's already prepared something better in return. But you have to make room for it. You can't carry yesterday's grief into tomorrow's promise and expect joy to grow in that soil. A new life requires a new mindset. So, if you're still holding on to guilt, regret, bitterness, or the comfort of what used to be, ask yourself this: what have I missed by refusing to let go? What blessing have I postponed because I kept rehearsing the same pain? There is more for you, but it won't be found in reverse. The future is not behind you, and neither is God. He goes ahead of you, inviting you to follow with open hands and a willing heart. This is not a message of shame, it's a message of invitation. You are invited to release what no longer belongs, so you can receive what always did. You were never meant to stay stuck in chapter 3 when your story holds chapters still unwritten. So take a breath, acknowledge what was, then turn the page. Because what God has for you won't wait forever, and the only way forward is through the freedom of letting go. Not every thought that enters your mind deserves a seat at your table. Some thoughts not demanding attention, anger, resentment, fantasies of revenge. They disguise themselves as justice, as strength, as protection. But in truth, they are weight. They don't lift you. They trap you in cycles of pain disguised as power. I've discovered that dwelling on what went wrong, or hurt you, or what should have been, does nothing to rewrite the past and everything to poison your future. The first shift in spiritual growth begins here, in how you think, in what you choose to hold on to when the storm inside your mind won't settle. Many confuse reaction with strength. They think lashing out is taking control, but I've learned that true power is restraint. Strength is choosing peace when offense would be easier. It's refusing to give someone the keys to your inner world simply because they threw a stone at it. There's a cost to carrying bitterness. It doesn't just follow you, it starts to live in you, and over time it robs your joy, clouds your decisions, and dulls your sensitivity to what is beautiful. If you want to be spiritually awake, you cannot afford to let your thoughts wander without guidance. They must be stewarded. They must be chosen. Scripture offers not only comfort but strategy. Philippians 4:8 gives a clear direction for mental alignment. Whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, think about such things. This is more than poetic instruction. It's spiritual warfare. The human mind does not drift toward holiness. It drifts toward chaos. That's why the discipline of focus is a spiritual act. You must intentionally feed your mind truth, or it will feed itself lies. I know this not just from reading, but from living. The times I let my thoughts spiral into resentment or despair, I became a prisoner in a cell. I built myself one thought at a time. But the good news is this: if your thinking created the trap, your thinking can also become the path out. And that's where the transformation begins. When you take your thoughts captive, when you filter them through faith, something begins to shift. You start to recognize that not every thought is your identity. Some are just visitors shaped by fear or past pain, and you can choose to send them away. That's not denial, that's discernment. There's wisdom in refusing to let your inner world be ruled by outer conflict. Here's where many struggle. They believe they have no control over what they think. But you are not at the mercy of your mind. You are its guardian. And like any guardian, you must be alert. Pay attention to your patterns. Do your thoughts lift you into peace, or do they pull you into unrest? When you notice your thoughts becoming cynical, harsh, or bitter, that's your signal to pause, to reroot. The mind is like soil. It will grow whatever you plant. If you sow negativity, don't be surprised when you reap anxiety. But if you plant praise, gratitude, truth, and grace, you'll begin to see something different growing inside you, something holy. I'm not saying this is instant. It's a process of practice. You may have to remind yourself 20 times a day to shift your focus. But each time you do, you are reclaiming sacred space in your soul. You are choosing what gets to stay and what must go. Over time, this becomes your new default. Not a mind constantly weighed down by what's broken, but a mind illuminated by what is beautiful, pure, and enduring. And from that place, your responses change. Your relationships heal and your perspective expands. So, the next time a negative thought rises, whether it's rooted in fear, anger, or regret, pause and ask yourself, does this thought honor God's truth or feed my pain? If it's not lifting you toward peace, it's not worth keeping. Replace it. Speak what is good. Think what is worthy. Anchor your mind in what is lasting. Because when your thoughts begin to align with God's heart, your life will follow. You will not just survive the pain, you will rise above it stronger and wiser with clarity in your mind and peace in your spirit. And that I found is where true joy begins. Your morning doesn't begin when your feet hit the floor. It begins the moment your eyes open. And in that first breath of awareness before the noise of the world reaches your ears, you're handed something sacred, a choice. Before any task text of trouble enters your mind, there's a window, a holy space, where you get to decide the tone of your entire day. I found that what you do with that space determines whether you walk into your day empowered or exhausted. The soul responds to what it's fed first. That's why gratitude isn't just a good habit. It's a spiritual foundation. When you wake, your body may still feel heavy, your mind foggy, but your spirit is awake. And in that early moment, even before your logic engages, the heart is listening. That's why the first words matter. Not just what you speak aloud, but what you speak internally. When you begin your day with a complaint, you empower frustration. But when you begin with thanks, you awaken joy. I've made it my personal discipline to whisper even before getting up, thank you, Lord. Thank you for breath. Thank you for mercy. Thank you for another chance. It's not because life is perfect, but because grace is present. Gratitude reorients the soul. It turns your gaze from what's missing to what's already given. It's easy to think of gratitude as something reactive, what you express after something good happens. But real spiritual gratitude is proactive. It anticipates goodness, even when your circumstances haven't changed. That kind of gratitude doesn't wait for blessings to show up before it speaks. It speaks in advance. It thanks God, not just for the obvious gifts, but for the unseen protection, the strength to endure, the quiet miracles that never make headlines in your life, but hold everything together. And here's the wisdom I've learned through experience. When you thank God before the day even begins, you're not just expressing faith, you're building it. You're creating alignment between your thoughts and heaven's reality. Gratitude shifts the weight of your spirit. It lifts you out of anxiety and grounds you in assurance. You stop chasing peace and start recognizing that it's already yours. The external world might remain chaotic, but your inner world becomes steady. You carry a stillness into a world obsessed with speed. That stillness comes from knowing that every breath you take is permission to start again. Too often, people wait to feel grateful, but feelings are unreliable. They fluctuate based on mood, weather, or the news. If you wait until everything goes right to give thanks, you'll spend most of your life silent. But if you train your heart to say thank you before anything has happened, you've already won a battle most don't even see coming. Starting the day with gratitude is like putting on armor. It's not decorative, it's protective. It guards your perspective from being hijacked by negativity. It shields your joy from being stolen before noon. This doesn't require a long list or eloquent words. Sometimes all it takes is pausing before the scroll, before the rush, before the schedule, and simply acknowledging the giver of the day. Thank you for waking me up. Thank you for the breath in my lungs. Thank you that I'm still here, which means you're not done with me yet. That kind of awareness recalibrates the heart. It teaches you to see the ordinary as holy, And when you start seeing that way, you don't need something big to feel blessed. Small things become enough. Quiet moments become sacred. And the day ahead becomes an invitation instead of a burden. Your attitude in the morning sets the tone for your decision, reactions, and posture throughout the day. If your first thought is rooted in frustration or dread, that energy follows you. But if your first thought is rooted in gratitude, you begin your day from a place of overflow. And the overflow of a thankful heart blesses everything it touches. You're more patient in traffic. You're more present in conversation. You're more resilient when something goes wrong. Not because the day is easier, but because your spirit is stronger. And here's the final truth I've discovered. God responds to gratitude, not because he needs praise, but because gratitude signals trust. It says, I believe you're good, even when I don't see it yet. It says, I'm open to what you're doing, even when I don't understand it. Gratitude invites God to move not just around you, but within you. It creates room for wonder, for wisdom, for worship. It prepares you to see his fingerprints in the details of your day, the ones you'd otherwise overlook. So, before you reach for your phone, your to-do list, or your worries, reach for a word of thanks. Make it your first offering. Make it your daily reset. Because how you begin the day isn't just about the morning. It's about the momentum you carry. And the most powerful way to step into your purpose is with a grateful heart leading the way. That is the posture that opens heaven and awakens joy. That is the mindset that makes the ordinary extraordinary. And that, I believe, is how every chosen life should begin. Chaos outside doesn't have to become chaos within. Life will bring storms, some expected, others arriving without warning. But the mark of spiritual maturity is not found in the absence of trouble. It's revealed in how steady your mind remains when everything around you starts to shake. I've learned that peace is not the product of perfect conditions. It's the result of a disciplined mind, anchored in the truth of who God is. When trouble knocks, it doesn't need to take over your thoughts. You have the power to stay rooted, focused, and clear, even while standing in the middle of uncertainty. It's easy to confuse control with calm. Many think peace comes when everything is fixed, but real peace begins before the solution arrives. It begins with trust. When the future feels blurry and the outcome remains unknown, that's the moment to decide what you believe about God. Do you trust his timing? Do you trust his heart when you don't understand his hand? If you can answer yes, even quietly, then your peace doesn't rely on circumstances. It flows from conviction. I've faced moments where nothing made sense, but one truth held me in place: God is still sovereign. That isn't just a phrase. It's the unshakable core of spiritual confidence. That's why the battle for peace is mostly won in the mind. The thoughts you allow will either stabilize you or scatter you. When adversity rises, thoughts like, I can't do this will never end, or God has forgotten me often show up first. But those thoughts are not harmless. They are intruders. And the longer you entertain them, the more they reshape your vision. You begin to see the trial as permanent, the fear as truth, and your strength as insufficient. That's why I choose to respond quickly. I silence those lies with truth. I speak what I know even if I don't feel it. God is with me. This season has a purpose. I am not alone and I am not defeated. There is wisdom in maintaining mental alignment with God's promises. His word isn't just a comfort, it's a recalibration. When everything around you screams uncertainty, Scripture whispers assurance. It brings you back to the foundation. Isaiah said God will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are stayed on him. That verse is not poetic fluff, it's a spiritual strategy. It means peace is not passive, it's something you set. And once your mind is set, you become immovable, not because the storm stops, but because your soul has found its anchor. Of course, there will be disappointments. Doors will close. Plans will fall apart. People may walk away. But none of those things mean God has abandoned you. In fact, many times the closing of one door is the precise evidence that God is guiding you. You see, what you lose doesn't define His love. What changes doesn't cancel His character. He is the same, always faithful, always working even in silence. That's what it means to walk by faith and not by sight. Faith isn't the absence of concern. It's the presence of assurance in the middle of the unknown. And here's what I've noticed: the enemy works over time in the space between what you expected and what actually happened. He uses disappointment as a wedge to shake your mind loose from its foundation. That's why mental discipline is critical. You can't wait until you feel calm to choose calm. You must claim it early. The first thought, the first breath, the first reaction, they all matter. Because what starts small often grows quickly. So speak stability into your own atmosphere. Say, my mind is set. My heart is firm. God is in control. These aren't just words. They are declarations of alignment with heaven's reality. You may not control the pace or direction of every circumstance, but you do control your perspective. And sometimes that's the very test. Will you keep your mind grounded in truth, even when your situation tempts you to panic? If you can train your thoughts to stay fixed on what's unchanging, then even when the path is unfamiliar, your spirit won't be. You'll walk forward not with all the answers, but with the quiet boldness that comes from knowing the one who does. So, when your day begins with uncertainty or ends in disappointment, remember this: the world may shift, people may falter, plans may crumble, but God never moves. And as long as your thoughts remain tethered to that truth, nothing can shake what's rooted in Him. That's where strength comes from, not in knowing the future, but in trusting the one who holds it. Keep your mind stayed on Him, and your peace will remain unshaken. You are not a prisoner to every thought that crosses your mind. One of the greatest revelations I've ever received is this: your thoughts are not in control, you are. Too many live as if they must accept every anxious, bitter, or fearful idea that enters their mental space. But thoughts are not masters. They are messengers. And just because a messenger arrives does not mean you must receive its message. The ability to discern which thoughts deserve a home in your mind is one of the most spiritually powerful choices you will ever make. It's the difference between living captive to fear and walking in the freedom of faith. This power to choose doesn't always feel like power, especially when emotions rise and circumstances weigh heavy. It can seem as though negative thinking is the only honest response. But the truth is, your emotions respond to your focus. What you dwell on becomes what you feel, and what you feel begins to shape how you act, how you speak, and how you relate to God and others. I've found that many spiritual battles are won or lost, not in the outer world, but in the unseen territory of thought. The heart may desire peace, but if the mind is not aligned, the heart will remain restless. Understanding this doesn't make the battle easier, but it does make the outcome clearer. You have authority over what stays in your mind. You can't always stop a negative thought from arriving, but you can absolutely refuse to entertain it. You can say, this idea does not serve the truth of who I am or the truth of who God is. You can shut the door on the spiral before it pulls you in. That is not repression. It's spiritual stewardship. You were never meant to be tossed around by every mental storm. You were called to speak peace to the chaos within. This shift is not about pretending bad things don't happen or forcing a fake smile through pain. It's about deciding where your focus belongs. There will always be something to worry about, something to resent, something to regret. But there will also always be something to celebrate, to give thanks for, to rejoice in. The question is, what do you want to magnify? Because what you magnify will begin to define your atmosphere. I choose joy, not because my life is perfect, but because my faith tells me that joy is available even when life is not easy. That choice becomes my act of resistance against despair. Joy is not an emotional reaction. It is a spiritual discipline. It must be chosen often in defiance of what you feel. When Scripture says rejoice, always, it doesn't suggest life will always give you a reason to laugh. It's saying you can find joy when you choose to look beyond the present problem to the eternal promise. That kind of joy is not loud or artificial. It's quiet, resilient, and deep. It comes from knowing that God is still writing your story even when the current chapter feels unbearable. It's rooted in the certainty that no pain is wasted and no moment is meaningless in His hands. To live this way requires intentional thinking. It means pausing when fear tries to write the script for your day. It means countering the lie with the truth. When the thought says, "I'll never make it through this," you say, "God is my strength, and He's never failed me yet." When your mind whispers, "I'm not enough," you remind yourself that you are chosen, equipped, and loved. This isn't wishful thinking. This is renewing your mind, and it's one of the most repeated commands in Scripture. Why? Because God knows how easily we forget who we are when our thoughts are left unguarded. This discipline is even more critical in moments of stress or transition. The enemy does his finest work in mental passivity. When you stop being intentional, negativity creeps in quietly, slowly draining your energy and clouding your faith. That's why you must be proactive. Fill your mind before the enemy has a chance to occupy it. Read truth. Speak truth. Surround yourself with voices that lift your perspective. Protect your mental atmosphere the way you would guard your home from a thief. Not everything deserves entrance. Not everything is welcome. This process won't always feel natural at first. You might have years of habit built around fear, anxiety, or cynicism. But habits are made of repetition, and what was repeated in fear can be undone in faith. Every time you choose a new thought, you're building new pathways in the mind, pathways that align with the mind of Christ. And over time, joy stops being a rare visitor and starts becoming your native language. You begin to walk differently. You react differently, because your thoughts no longer flow from pain but from peace. It's important to know that choosing joy doesn't mean ignoring grief. It means carrying it differently. It means saying, "Yes, this hurts, but I will not let this define my whole view of life." It means honoring your emotions without surrendering your perspective. This balance is not easy, but it's holy. And it's the kind of life God desires for His children. Not a life free of trouble, but a life rooted in deeper hope. Joy, after all, is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of God in the midst of it. So, as you walk through today, notice your thoughts. Don't let them run wild. Catch them. Ask, is this thought building me or breaking me? Is it rooted in truth or fear? Then decide. Because the moment you choose to redirect your focus, you are stepping into spiritual authority. You are not waiting for joy to happen to you. You are choosing it. And in that choice, you are echoing heaven's mindset over your life. This is where transformation begins, not in your surroundings, not in your circumstances, but in your thinking. When you take charge of your mind, you begin to live from a deeper place. You move from reaction to revelation, from survival to purpose. And that shift is not just powerful, it's eternal. Because when your mind is set, your spirit can soar. And joy, real joy, becomes not just something you feel. It becomes something you carry, something you live, something you give away. And that kind of life, that's where faith turns into freedom. Joy is not a response to ease. It's a decision rooted in perspective. Gratitude is not reserved for when things go your way. It's a choice to see meaning in moments that don't look like miracles. I've learned that waiting for ideal conditions to rejoice is a sure way to miss the divine in the middle of the storm. Because joy, true joy, is never about perfection. It's about presence. God's presence in your life is not seasonal. It doesn't retreat when the clouds gather. It remains. And that alone is reason enough to be thankful in all things, not just in the good ones. When we think of gratitude, we often picture abundance, health, success, celebration. But the most powerful kind of gratitude isn't born from comfort. It's born in pressure. It's forged in pain. I've known this personally. The days I chose to thank God in the middle of disappointment were the days I discovered what faith truly looks like. It's easy to say God is good when everything's working. But when you declare it through tears, through setbacks, through seasons of silence, those words carry eternal weight. That's when gratitude becomes a weapon against despair. That's when joy becomes your spiritual stance, not your emotional state. This mindset doesn't develop by accident. It takes deliberate focus. It takes the kind of maturity that says, even if nothing changes today, I will still choose joy. Even if I don't feel it, I will speak it. Even if the answers don't come, I will remain thankful for what I already have. That's not denial. That's spiritual clarity. It's the refusal to let circumstances decide what your heart will carry. The truth is, your surroundings will always shift, but gratitude roots you in what is eternal. And what's eternal never moves. Some will say, how can I be joyful when I'm suffering? How can I give thanks when everything feels wrong? My answer is this: you don't have to feel it to choose it. That's the power of the will. God gave us the ability to direct our focus, and that focus can either magnify the problem or magnify the promise. When you choose to give thanks, even in lack, even in loss, you are declaring that your hope is anchored in something greater than your current moment. That's not just resilience. That's divine alignment. Over time, I've watched how consistent gratitude changes the spirit. It reshapes how you interpret your journey. You stop asking why me and start asking what can grow from this. You stop seeing the situation as punishment and start viewing it as preparation. When you live this way, joy is no longer a fragile flame that gets snuffed out by the wind. It becomes a fire that spreads, igniting others around you who are still stuck in shadows. That's the quiet influence of a grateful heart. It doesn't shout, but it shines. And this choice isn't meant to be occasional. It's meant to be daily. Scripture says, "This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it." It doesn't say only if the day goes well. It says, this is the day. That means even the mundane day, even the disappointing day, even the difficult one. Every day is a canvas for praise if your eyes are open to see it. Gratitude trains your vision to see God, not only in the mountaintop moments, but in the valleys too. And when you start living that way, your soul becomes steadier. Your heart becomes lighter. I've walked through seasons where joy felt impossible. I've seen grief up close. I've faced delay, rejection, and silence. But I've also seen how God meets those who choose to thank Him in the dark. There is a kind of strength He releases only to those who dare to trust Him with their sorrow. And joy becomes the fruit of that trust. Not surface-level happiness, but real, enduring joy, the kind that survives the storm and still stands. That's the kind of life God invites you into. A life not dictated by emotions, but led by revelation. So today, whatever your situation looks like, you still have a choice. Will you rehearse your troubles, or will you recall His faithfulness? Will you focus on what's missing, or will you honor what remains? Will you wait for joy to find you, or will you rise and choose it before the day unfolds? Gratitude doesn't come after the blessing, it creates the atmosphere for it. And joy doesn't wait for peace to show up. It walks ahead of it, declaring, God is still good, and I am still grateful. That kind of living takes courage. It takes spiritual discipline, but it will lead you into a freedom that circumstances can't take. And that is worth everything. Because once you learn to choose joy and give thanks in every season, you won't just endure life, you'll experience it fully with open hands and an awakened heart. You will live like someone who truly believes that every breath is grace and every moment is holy. And that, I believe, is exactly the kind of life you were created to live. You were never created just to survive. You were created to live fully, abundantly, and joyfully. That truth is not just theological, it's deeply practical. I've come to realize that many people, even believers, settle for existence when God designed them for experience. They wake up, go through the motions, endure their circumstances, and call that life. But there's more, and that more doesn't start when everything gets better. It begins when you decide to find joy, even while things are still hard. Because real joy is not the outcome of comfort, it is the fruit of divine perspective. Pain does not cancel the promise of joy. If it did, Jesus himself could never have said, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. He didn't say that when everything was going smoothly. He said it knowing that his followers would walk through persecution, trials, and hardship. Which tells me something powerful. Joy is not a fragile emotion. It is a supernatural resilience, and God wants every one of his children to walk in that reality, not as a temporary escape, but as a daily way of living. To live with joy in hard times doesn't mean denying your struggles. It means refusing to let those struggles define your spirit. Life will always present reasons to be discouraged. There will always be unanswered questions, moments of grief, and waves of uncertainty. But none of those have the authority to shut down the joy that comes from knowing you are loved by God, seen by him, and sustained by his grace. I've learned that joy is not about how light the day feels. It's about how deeply you choose to see what's eternal. And that choice must be made deliberately. Every morning you stand at a crossroads. Will I carry yesterday's heaviness, or will I embrace today's opportunity? Will I be defined by what's missing, or will I be shaped by what remains? Joy often begins as a whisper, not a shout. You may have to speak it into existence before you feel it in your emotions. You may have to declare, God, thank you for this life, even when your circumstances seem to contradict the gratitude. But I can promise you, gratitude always creates room for joy to grow. I've walked through seasons where I saw no visible reason to rejoice, but in those very seasons, I discovered the hidden strength of joy. It became my resistance against despair, my protest against hopelessness. Joy said, this situation will not bury me. I will breathe, I will believe, I will bless the Lord anyway. That posture doesn't come from shallow optimism. It comes from a soul anchored in something deeper than the moment. It comes from knowing that even if I have nothing else, I still have a reason to smile, because God has never left me. When I say that joy is a choice, I mean it in the deepest spiritual sense. It is not pretending. It is not minimizing pain. It is choosing to elevate truth above circumstance. The truth that God is for you. The truth that he is with you. The truth that nothing is wasted in his hands. And when you choose that truth over and over again, joy becomes a habit of the heart, not just an emotional spike, but a sustained way of seeing life, a way of walking through fire and still knowing you're not consumed. Joy is also contagious. When you carry it with intention, it spills over. People notice. They ask questions. They wonder how you're smiling while grieving, how you're hopeful while waiting, how you're singing while suffering. And that becomes your testimony, not that you were spared from hardship, but that you were sustained through it, that you found the river of joy running through even the driest desert, that you encountered the presence of God, not in the absence of pain, but right in the center of it. This way of living doesn't just affect your emotions, it transforms your impact. You stop waiting for your situation to improve before you start praising. You stop holding back your best self for some future season that may never come. Instead, you live now, you rejoice now, you love now, and in doing so, you step into the very life Jesus died to give you, not just an eternal life after death, but an abundant life here and now. So, if today is difficult, if you're walking through pressure or uncertainty, this is not the time to retreat. This is the time to lean in, to search for what is still good to name, what is still beautiful to thank God, for what is still holding. You may not be able to change your situation, but you can change how you live through it. And joy, deep lasting joy, will carry you further than strength ever could. This is not theory. This is truth I have lived. I've discovered joy in the ruins, found laughter in laments, and touched heaven with tears still on my face. That's why I believe joy isn't fragile, it's holy. It's not fleeting, it's foundational, and it is yours right now, right here, even in the middle of it all. So take it, choose it, carry it, because this life is not just about getting through, it's about shining through. And joy is the light that will never go out. God doesn't desire to meet you only in moments drenched in worship or in the stillness of your Sunday prayer. He wants to walk with you into every part of your life, the ordinary, the overlooked, the routine. I've come to see that spiritual maturity isn't just measured by how often you attend church or how eloquently you pray. It's revealed in how fully you allow God into your everyday moments. The kitchen, the classroom, the work meeting, the traffic jam. These places are not separate from His presence. They are stages where His grace is waiting to enter if you'll only open the door. Far too often we separate the sacred from the secular. We act as if God fits only into quiet times and sacred spaces, while the rest of life plays out on its own terms. But I've discovered that true transformation happens when that barrier is removed. When you stop compartmentalizing your spiritual life, you begin to see how faith touches everything. The way you speak to your children, the way you respond to stress, the way you view your time, your money, your work. Everything begins to carry the imprint of heaven when you invite God to sit at the center of it all. And this invitation doesn't require dramatic gestures. It starts with a whisper in the middle of an ordinary task. God, be with me as I do this. Guide my tone in this conversation. Help me bring patience into this moment. When you begin to live this way, your awareness of His nearness increases. You realize He is not a distant figure waiting for the right conditions. He is a present help, a gentle voice, a constant strength, even in the smallest routines. And what was once mundane becomes meaningful because it is shared with Him. This practice is less about religion and more about relationship. Imagine being with someone you love deeply, yet only speaking to them for a few scheduled minutes each day. That wouldn't be intimacy. That would be obligation. But God desires something far more alive than that. He wants your attention during the in-between, during the drive, the dishes, the deadlines. These are the moments where the invitation matters most. It's not because God needs your acknowledgement, it's because your soul does. When you involve Him, you see differently, feel differently, respond differently. The spiritual life stops being a thing you turn on and off. It becomes the atmosphere you carry. And here's something sacred I've discovered: inviting God in doesn't just change how you experience your life. It changes what your life produces. Peace in your mind, clarity in your decisions, compassion in your speech. When He's welcomed into the ordinary, the fruit becomes extraordinary. You stop operating in exhaustion and start operating in grace. You stop striving to control everything and start trusting that He is working, even when you can't see it. That's the freedom that comes from union, not separation. Some hesitate to bring God into the ordinary because they think it's not worthy of Him. But I've found the opposite to be true. God delights in being involved in your ordinary because it means you're allowing Him to walk closely. He never asked you to reserve Him for only spiritual activities. He asked for your whole heart, and that includes your errands, your frustrations, your schedule, and your silence. Every part of your life becomes holy ground when you welcome Him into it. This mindset also brings alignment. When you start each day by saying, God, this day is yours, something shifts. You don't just react to circumstances. You move with purpose. You pause before responding. You see interruptions as invitations. You allow your goals to be shaped by eternal vision, not just personal ambition. And in that process, you stop chasing the illusion of balance and begin walking in alignment to life that's not split between sacred and secular, but fully surrendered. So, if you've been holding God at the edges of your life, consider what might happen if you brought Him into the middle. Not just in crisis, not just in devotion, but in every detail. That's where peace deepens. That's where clarity sharpens. That's where the soul begins to live, not in fragments, but in fullness. And that, I believe, is the kind of life God always intended for you to live. Not a life where He visits occasionally, but a life where He dwells completely, continually, and beautifully within all that you are and all that you do. Joy isn't always found in the mountaintop moments or grand victories. More often than not, it's quietly waiting in the ordinary, right in the places we rush past or overlook. I've learned that when you invite God into your everyday rhythm, your awareness sharpens. Suddenly, what once felt routine becomes radiant. Washing dishes is no longer a chore. It's a moment of stillness, of serving with love. Sitting in traffic becomes less about frustration and more about reflection. Joy doesn't require spectacle. It requires presence. And when God's presence saturates your ordinary joy, shows up even in silence, there's a reason people feel empty, even when their lives are full of activity. It's not the lack of motion, it's the lack of meaning. But when you begin to live with spiritual intention, you start discovering that joy is not something you wait for. It's something you cultivate moment by moment. You find it in the laugh of your child, in the smell of morning coffee, in the quiet before your day begins. These aren't just passing comforts, they're holy reminders. And when you start seeing them that way, life doesn't have to be exciting to be joyful. It just needs to be filled with purpose. Too many people postpone joy, thinking it only belongs in future victories or answered prayers. But joy is not a reward for achieving peace. It's a companion on the way to it. And this truth reshapes how you live your daily life. You stop measuring your day by what went right or wrong and instead begin measuring it by how fully you notice the grace woven into it. That's when a simple walk becomes communion. That's when folding laundry becomes an act of love. That's when your life, just as it is, begins to carry the fragrance of eternity. This shift happens not through effort, but through awareness. When your heart becomes trained to see the sacred in the simple, you stop chasing joy and start discovering that it was there all along. But you have to be willing to slow down. You have to pause long enough to taste and see that the Lord is good, not just in miracles, but in the mundane. That is where true maturity of faith is built, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet consistency of ordinary faithfulness. And when this awareness takes root, it changes how you interact with others. Your conversations carry more grace. Your presence brings calm. Your attitude carries light into rooms that might otherwise feel dull. Not because your circumstances changed, but because your lens did. You no longer live for the next big thing. You live fully inside the moment God has already given. And in doing so, you bear witness to a deeper kind of joy, the kind that is unshaken by difficulty and untouched by circumstance. This isn't about becoming overly sentimental or romanticizing simplicity. It's about embracing the truth that God often hides his most powerful revelations in plain sight. Jesus broke bread, not gold, to reveal himself. He walked dusty roads, sat by wells, and told stories about seeds and soil. That's where he met people in their everyday. And that's still where he meets us. If he chooses to dwell in the ordinary, then the ordinary must be holy. And if it's holy, then it's enough. You don't need a perfect day to experience joy. You just need an open heart, a present mind, and the humility to see God in what most would call small. The world may celebrate loud victories, but heaven often moves in whispers. And if you're listening, those whispers will become the melody of joy that carries you through each day. Not just the high points, but every in-between. That is the miracle of walking with God in your daily life. That is the joy that doesn't fade. That is where real living begins. Gratitude isn't reserved for grand moments. True spiritual depth begins when you train your heart to give thanks, not only for the miraculous but also for the mundane. I've found that when you begin to thank God for small things, a warm meal, a safe drive, a moment of laughter, you awaken your soul to the richness of his presence in everyday life. The world often teaches us to wait for the extraordinary before we express appreciation, but faith invites us to see that every breath, every heartbeat, every sunrise is already a reason to say thank you. Daily gratitude is not about surface-level optimism. It's about spiritual recognition. It's saying, I see your hand here, God, even if others miss it. I see you in the details, the parking space when I was running late, the unexpected text that lifted my mood, the strength to do something I didn't think I could do. When you begin to acknowledge these small things, your awareness grows, your heart softens, and your relationship with God deepens, not because he changes, but because your eyes finally open wide enough to notice what he's already doing. This habit reshapes your inner atmosphere. When you wake up each morning and begin with gratitude, even before you see how the day unfolds, you're declaring that your joy is not based on circumstances. You're reminding your spirit that God's faithfulness didn't begin with your breakthrough, and it won't end with your battles. Gratitude becomes the doorway through which peace enters. The more you practice it, the more naturally it flows. At first, it might feel forced, especially on difficult days. But I've learned that consistency rewires the soul. What feels mechanical today becomes transformational tomorrow. It's easy to thank God when prayers are answered and doors open. But the beauty of daily gratitude is that it teaches you to thank him even when life feels uncertain. It says, I don't need to see the full picture to honor the artist. That's what makes it a spiritual discipline. It goes beyond emotion and becomes an act of trust. Gratitude in hardship doesn't ignore pain. It declares that even in pain, God is still good. Even in waiting, he is still working. Even in weakness, he is still worthy of thanks. And this isn't a practice meant to stay quiet or internal. The more you live gratefully, the more your words begin to reflect it. You speak differently about your challenges. You respond with more grace. You become slower to complain, quicker to bless. Gratitude changes how you see yourself and others. It reminds you that no moment is wasted, no provision too small, no gesture too ordinary to matter. It reminds you that every moment has the potential to become sacred if it's seen through the lens of thankfulness. Scripture doesn't command us to be thankful sometimes, or when things go well. It says, in everything give thanks. That kind of calling isn't casual, it's spiritual warfare. Giving thanks is how we fight back against discouragement, bitterness, and spiritual apathy. It's how we build endurance. It's how we stay sensitive to the Holy Spirit. And it's how we begin to carry a different kind of peace, one not built on perfection, but on perspective. If you want to experience a fuller spiritual life, start here. Not with a dramatic gesture, but with a quiet pause. Before the day starts, before the news headlines, before the rush of demands, whisper thank you. Thank you for the stillness. Thank you for the breath. Thank you for the chance to try again. And as the day unfolds, carry that same posture with you, in the long lines, in the unexpected delays, in the difficult conversations, in the simple joys. Keep saying it. Keep meaning it. Gratitude, when practiced daily, becomes a lifestyle of praise. And what I've seen over time is this: the more you thank God for small things, the more you begin to see just how much He's already done. You realize your life is not lacking wonder, it's lacking attention. Once your attention returns to the blessings already present, joy follows, peace follows, and most importantly, intimacy with God deepens. Because you're no longer looking for Him in only the loud and large moments. You're finding Him in the quiet, hidden corners of your everyday life. That to me is the true beauty of faith, not in the performance of religion, but in the quiet rhythm of recognizing grace every single day. So begin today, begin small, but begin. And watch how your life transforms from something you endure into something you treasure, all because you chose to say thank you, even when no one else thought you had a reason to. Gratitude has the quiet power to shift your entire perspective without changing a single circumstance. I've seen how a thankful heart doesn't erase challenges, but it changes how you see them. What once felt like burdens begin to look like opportunities. What seemed like interruptions begin to feel like divine redirections. This isn't magic or denial, it's clarity. Gratitude clears the lens through which you view your life. It doesn't demand that life be easy. It simply trains your eyes to notice what's still good, still stable, still sacred, even when everything around you feels uncertain. When you begin to live this way, your mind starts to reorganize itself. Instead of scanning each moment for what's wrong, you start searching for what's right. And that shift changes the atmosphere of your thoughts. Worry loses its grip. Resentment shrinks. Complaints grow quieter. Gratitude gives your spirit something better to focus on. It's not that pain disappears. It just stops being the loudest voice in the room. Joy moves to the forefront. Peace becomes more accessible. And hope, once hidden beneath disappointment, starts to rise again. This change doesn't happen by accident. It comes through intentional reflection. When you take time each day to acknowledge what you're thankful for, you're doing more than creating a list. You're training your soul. You're reminding yourself that life is not measured solely by what you achieve or escape, but by what you notice. The small blessings, the simple victories, the quiet mercies, these become your anchors. And over time, your heart begins to expect goodness even in places where you once only braced for pain. I've learned that gratitude doesn't just change how you see your life. It changes how you see God. You stop approaching Him only with requests and start approaching Him with recognition. You stop wondering where He is and start realizing where He's already been. And that awareness builds trust. It builds intimacy. It transforms your prayers from desperate demands into meaningful conversations. You begin to speak less from lack and more from love. And that kind of spiritual relationship carries you through every season, not just the easy ones. This posture also affects how you handle hardship. Gratitude doesn't ignore suffering, it reframes it. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is this teaching me? What is God forming in me through this?" That change in question creates space for growth, even in grief. You stop waiting for life to get easier before you find peace. You begin to realize that peace is available right now, hidden in the very places you used to overlook. That is the brilliance of gratitude. It turns common moments into sacred ones and transforms obstacles into altars. Even in relationships, gratitude shifts your approach. You stop keeping score of wrongs and start celebrating presence. You become more gracious, more patient, more attentive. You notice the good in people instead of magnifying their flaws. You speak words of encouragement more freely, not because everything is perfect, but because you've learned to see the beauty in imperfection. This doesn't mean you ignore problems. It means you refuse to let negativity dominate your worldview. And that, in turn, makes you a source of peace for others, not just yourself. This lifestyle of gratitude is more than a mindset. It's a spiritual discipline. And like any discipline, it grows stronger with practice. Some days it will come easily. Other days you'll have to choose it deliberately, maybe even through tears. But each time you do, you strengthen the habit of seeing through heaven's perspective rather than your own. You begin to live from a place of abundance, not scarcity. From expectancy, not fear. From praise, not panic. So, if your thoughts have been heavy, if your perspective has been clouded, start here. Start small. Name one thing, one grace, one reason to say thank you, and then do it again tomorrow, and the day after that. With time, you'll find that gratitude doesn't just live in your words, it lives in your walk. It becomes the background music to your life, guiding you gently, lifting your focus, and tuning your heart to the rhythm of God's goodness. And from that place, everything begins to look different, not because your life is perfect, but because your eyes finally see the perfect grace already present within it. Life is not promised beyond the moment you're in. Each day arrives as a gift wrapped not always in perfect circumstances, but in the miracle of breath, time, and new possibility. I've come to see that the most powerful way to honor this gift is by choosing joy and living with intention. Anger and sadness may visit, but they should never be allowed to take up permanent residence. When you hold tightly to frustration, you trade the beauty of now for the weight of what was or what could have been. But when you choose joy, even in the face of discomfort, you reclaim the day and all the grace it carries. There is something holy about waking up and deciding before anything unfolds that this day will not be wasted, that no matter what distractions come, no matter what others say or fail to say, you will find meaning in the hours ahead. This mindset is not naive, it's anchored. It's not built on blind optimism, but on a deep trust in the one who formed the day before you ever opened your eyes. That kind of trust fuels your decision to rejoice, not because everything is right, but because God is still good. And if He gave you today, it must have purpose. Living fully doesn't mean chasing after extremes or constantly seeking adventure. It means showing up present, thankful, open. It means engaging the little moments as if they matter because they do. The quiet cup of coffee, the long conversation with a friend, the walk where nothing was said but everything was understood. These aren't fillers between the big events. They are the sacred rhythm of life itself. And when joy becomes your lens, you start to realize you don't need extraordinary days to feel deeply alive. You just need to pay attention. Choosing joy each day also means rejecting the temptation to let external chaos steal your inner calm. The world will always offer reasons to be bitter, anxious, or weary, but your soul wasn't made to live in reaction to headlines or harsh words. It was made to dwell in communion with a steady, loving God. That truth is your anchor, and from that place of centeredness, you gain the strength to smile, to hope, to give yes, even when you're still waiting for your own breakthrough. Joy becomes not something you wait for, but something you carry. You don't need a perfect mood to practice this kind of living. You just need willingness, the willingness to pause when frustration rises and say, I choose something better. The willingness to bless the day rather than curse it. The willingness to believe that even the ordinary can be extraordinary if you meet it with the right spirit. That's what it means to live from a place of faith instead of feeling. Feelings will fluctuate, but your decision to rejoice can remain steady. And here's what I've learned: when you live this way, you influence more than your own life. Joy spills, gratitude spreads, your presence begins to shape rooms. Your peace becomes a shelter for others. That's how the kingdom of God grows, not only through preaching or power, but through people who live fully, love deeply, and walk lightly even under heavy burdens. That's what happens when someone chooses to see the day as a gift instead of a grind. So, wherever you are today, whatever this season looks like, you still have a choice. Will you rush through it, complain about it, fear it? Or will you receive it? Will you greet this day as if it carries the fingerprints of God Himself, because it does? And if He is in it, then joy is possible, even if nothing else goes as planned. You can live fully, not by escaping pain, but by refusing to surrender to it, not by avoiding trouble, but by finding treasure in the middle of it. That is the invitation every new morning extends to you. Not just to survive the hours ahead, but to live them with purpose, gratitude, and joy. The kind of joy that doesn't wait for circumstances to change. The kind of joy that breathes life into every ordinary moment. The kind of joy that honors the giver by fully embracing the gift. Today is that gift. Live it well. Live it with joy. And watch how everything else begins to shift around the strength of your yes. There comes a point where you no longer wait for joy to find you, you decide to walk toward it. I've seen how life rarely hands you the perfect moment to feel thankful or hopeful. More often, it offers you 1,000 small chances to choose gratitude in the middle of the ordinary. That choice, repeated daily, builds a life rooted not in reaction, but in revelation. You begin to realize that joy, gratitude, and a positive spirit are not reserved for the few who have easy paths. They are available to anyone who is willing to make a conscious decision to see through the eyes of faith. Attitude is the lens through which you interpret your reality. And just like any lens, it can either sharpen what's beautiful or distort what's true. When your heart is postured in thankfulness, you see beauty in places you once overlooked. A long day becomes an opportunity to grow in patience. A difficult person becomes a reminder to extend grace. A delay becomes a sacred pause to reflect. Gratitude trains your mind to extract goodness, even from discomfort. And when you begin to think this way, you don't just feel different, you live differently. This way of living requires intentionality. It's far too easy to default to negativity, especially in a world saturated with complaints, comparisons, and chaos. But a positive spirit isn't about pretending life is perfect. It's about choosing to focus on what's redeemable rather than what's regrettable. Every moment presents a choice: dwell in the frustration or elevate the focus. I've chosen the latter enough times to know that it doesn't erase hardship, but it does change how hardship affects me. It keeps bitterness from building roots. It keeps heaviness from owning the root. Gratitude is the ground where joy grows, and a positive attitude is the light that helps it flourish. When you combine both, you build a spiritual foundation that's hard to shake. This foundation doesn't come from a perfect season or a pain-free journey. It comes from deciding again and again that God is worthy of praise even when life isn't easy, that your blessings are still real even when they don't look like what you prayed for, and that your soul can still sing even when the answer hasn't come. Living this way doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you choose which part of reality gets the most attention. Will you obsess over what's missing, or celebrate what's here? Will you relive the loss or reflect on the lessons? Will you speak life or echo complaints? The answers to those questions shape more than your day. They shape your spirit. And the spirit you cultivate will follow you into every relationship, every challenge, every act of service. This decision also impacts how you treat others. A heart full of gratitude speaks with more kindness, listens with more patience, and gives with less hesitation. It carries the fragrance of peace wherever it goes, because it's not waiting to be filled, it's already overflowing. That kind of person is rare in a weary world, but they stand out not by force but by their quiet resolve to live with open eyes and an open heart. So begin today, not with a rush to fix everything, but with a simple resolve. I will enjoy what I've been given. I will thank God for what I used to take for granted. I will choose to notice beauty where I once saw burden. This is not wishful thinking. It's spiritual wisdom, and it leads to a life that is not only lighter but fuller. A life that's not defined by circumstances but by the posture of the soul. Every day you're alive is another invitation to live differently, not just by doing more but by seeing more. Seeing grace where others see lack, seeing hope where others see endings, seeing God not only in miracles but in moments. This is how you begin to live fully. This is how you take back your joy. This is how you make your life a testimony, one grateful breath at a time. You are stronger than you realize. You have walked through seasons that tried to break you, yet you're still here, and that is not by accident. God has preserved you for a purpose, and your faith has carried you further than your fears ever could. Everything we've shared in this message leads to one truth: you were made to live with joy, walk in gratitude, and stand firm in peace no matter the circumstance. Each day is a divine opportunity not to simply exist, but to reflect the light of the one who lives within you. Keep moving forward. Keep your eyes fixed on God, not on what's missing, but on what's possible. You are not walking alone, and your story is not finished. The one who called you is faithful. He is with you, and he is not done yet. Every act of trust, every decision to rejoice, every whispered prayer is shaping your next victory. You were not built to live in fear or defeat. You were built to overcome, to carry light, to reflect heaven. So take heart. You're closer than you think. Keep going. You're on the edge of breakthrough, and now I invite you into a moment of prayer, your next step toward clarity and calling. Father, I come to you with the person watching this right now. You know them deeply. You see what they carry, the quiet battles, the heavy thoughts, the longings they don't speak out loud, and you're not far from them. You are right here, in this room, in this moment, whispering hope into places that have gone silent. I thank you for bringing them here, for drawing their heart to this message, for stirring something within them that says, I'm ready for more. Lord, I ask that you begin to shift the atmosphere around them. Where there has been confusion, replace it with clarity. Where there's been fear, pour out peace. Where disappointment has hardened the heart, soften it again with purpose. Breathe into their dry places. Speak to their weary soul. Show them that what's ahead is greater than what's behind. Not because the road will always be easy, but because you will walk it with them. God, remind them that they are not forgotten. They are not too broken to be used. They are not too late to begin again. You specialize in new beginnings, in bringing beauty from ashes, in lighting up the path, one obedient step at a time. I ask that you release fresh vision right now. Stir something holy in their spirit. Give them courage to step away from what no longer serves their soul. Give them wisdom to walk away from fear, bitterness, or regret, and step into healing, alignment, and joy. I pray over their mind that it will be guarded by truth and not controlled by worry. I pray over their heart that it will be rooted in love and not ruled by disappointment. I pray over their decisions that they will be led by the Spirit and not by the pressure of the world. And I pray over their pace that they won't rush ahead or fall behind, but walk in step with you. Lord, you said that those who wait on you will renew their strength. They will rise on wings like eagles. So I speak renewal over this listener. I declare strength over their spirit, a fresh wind in their lungs, a restored fire in their calling, and a deep sense of belonging not to this world, but to you. Now, Father, I ask something bold. I ask that you reveal their next assignment. Don't let them wander in circles or sit in hesitation. Show them their next step. Whether it's a conversation they need to have, a boundary they need to set, a move they need to make, or a prayer they need to release, reveal it. Shine light on it. Speak so clearly that their soul cannot ignore it. I ask that you unlock their calling in this season. Not the one from last year, not the one others expect, but the one you ordained specifically for now. Align them with people who will sharpen their spirit. Connect them to those who walk in truth, speak life, and carry integrity. And remove anything or anyone from their path that seeks to distract, delay, or destroy what you are building within them. God, help them live fully. Help them see their days as gifts, their breath as grace, and their life as a canvas for your glory. Teach them to choose joy, not because life is easy, but because you are faithful. Teach them to walk with gratitude, not just when it's obvious, but especially when it's hard. And teach them to stay rooted in peace, not a peace built on perfection, but one anchored in your unchanging presence. Wrap them in your love right now. Cover them with your mercy. Fill every empty place with your Spirit. We believe that what you start, you finish. What you promise, you fulfill. What you touch, you transform. So we release their future into your hands and trust that you are already ahead of them, making a way. Thank you for being a good father. Thank you for being a faithful friend. Thank you for choosing them for this exact moment in history. Now, Lord, commission them, call them, guide them, and lead them into the next assignment that aligns with your will and brings glory to your name. In Jesus' name, amen. If this message has stirred something in your heart, if you felt God speaking directly to you through these words, don't let this moment pass by. Take a step forward today. Support this mission by clicking the like button and subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us continue to reach more people with truth, healing, and hope. And if this resonated with you, we invite you to be part of our community. Drop a 707 in the comments below. It's more than a number. It's a sign that you're stepping into spiritual alignment